Hey everyone, it's Alexander, the real Mr. Robinson. Welcome to the channel. This is my review for Fantasia 2000, which is the 38th Disney animated movie overall, the first of the post-Renaissance, and came out in 2000. The release of this movie is actually kind of strange, but I'll talk about that a little later. Basically, this is a sequel to Fantasia from 1940, the experimental concert film where they played iconic pieces of classical music set to Disney animation. And there was a lot riding on this movie because it's a sequel to one of the greatest Disney animated movies ever, and it's also a sequel to one of the big Disney animated movies that underperformed. The movie was actually pitched to Michael Eisner by Roy E. Disney as far as 1984, but it really didn't get off the ground until at least 15 years later. And do I think it's as good as the first Fantasia? Do I think it's a massive improvement, or is it just kind of meh overall, considering this film's history and the original idea that Fantasia was supposed to be a frequent thing? I would say that it's kind of all over the place. It has elements that are not as good as that first movie, because I think that first movie is still the superior one, but it also has elements that I think make it better and more unique than the first Fantasia. And in order for me to talk about the things that I think make this movie better and worse than the original, I have to review each of the segments individually. This movie is not that long, first of all. It's just a little over an hour and 10 minutes, so not as long as the original Fantasia. And that's one aspect that I think might make this more accessible to people who find the first Fantasia to be boring. I mean, I have to admit, as a kid, I found this movie infinitely more rewatchable than the original Fantasia, but again, I was a kid. So each of the segments, again, like the original, are set to pieces of classical music. The piece that opens the movie is Beethoven's Symphony No. 5, where it's pretty much focused on a flock of butterflies, very peaceful butterflies that suddenly get attacked by a bunch of murder moths that are just pure black, kind of like the Mothra Batra equivalent. You guys knew that had to come up at some point. But anyway, it's a fine piece. It's probably my least favorite, but the animation is very beautiful, very abstract. But at the end of the day, not only is it my least favorite segment of this movie, but it might be my least favorite Fantasia segment overall. Not bad, but just didn't really impress me beyond the look of the animation. Then the next one we have is The Pines of Rome, which is introduced by Steve Martin, and he has some comedic moments that feel a little forced, but I chuckled every now and then. That's another thing with this movie, is that unlike the original Fantasia, which only had one person introducing each segment, James Taylor, you have several people who have been involved with something Disney related in the past, and sometimes they come across as a little goofy, like Penn Teller, but overall it doesn't distract. But anyway, back to Pines of Rome. This is the one about the humpback whale family that can fly. And one thing you'll notice right off the bat is that the animation style for this and the previous segment are completely different. And that point is confirmed even further with the third segment, Rhapsody in Blue. And you could tell that the art style in this segment was influenced by the illustrations of Hal Hirschfeld, who passed away 3 years after this movie came out and served as a consultant for this segment in particular. And that's the thing that I think gives this movie the ultimate edge over the original Fantasia, is that the art style for each segment of this movie is completely different from the previous one. There are no two segments that look identical to each other, and it just makes it a more unique film. Both Pines of Rome and Rhapsody in Blue are both beautiful to look at in different ways, and I like how each of them have their own narrative. The fourth segment is based off of Hans Christian Andersen's The Steadfast Tin Soldier, and again, different art style from the past three segments, and it's another beautiful segment to watch as well, very charming, and it was actually a segment that was conceived as far back as the original Fantasia, but according to Bette Midler, they just couldn't find the right piece of music to accompany this story until this movie came out. Next up is Carnival of Animals, which is introduced by James Earl Jones, and it's the infamous flamingo with yo-yos, which I think is cute. It's not a long segment. In fact, it's actually pretty short, shockingly short in my opinion. And I just find it to be very amusing. You just have this whole flock of flamingos that try to be as eloquent as possible. And you have the one outcast that just loves playing with yo-yos. And I'm watching this segment thinking to myself, let this bird enjoy his yo-yos. Flamingos are probably the goofiest bird alive today. They're noisy, they look funny, and we love them for that, but there's no reason for these birds to be, like, graceful. I don't know, this segment put a smile on my face. I know it might annoy a lot of people, especially fans of the subtle nature of the first movie, but I think it's fine. Now, one of the things that Walt Disney wanted to do with Fantasia, if it was an ongoing series, was to not only create new pieces of animation set to other classical music, but also to bring in previous segments. And the segment to follow Carnival of Animals is The Sorcerer's Apprentice. And I have to be honest, before I sat down to record this review, I thought to myself, I should just edit that segment of my Fantasia review into this one and see if people catch it. But I'm not gonna do that, because I feel like it might just be a waste of everyone's time, and everyone knows The Sorcerer's Apprentice. It's great. Then the one to follow The Sorcerer's Apprentice is Pomp and Circumstance, which is a retelling of Noah's Ark, but you have Donald Duck in the role, and this segment is really funny. The entire segment of the movie is pretty much a Donald Duck cartoon. It's wacky, it's goofy, it's everything you would expect from Donald Duck, except, you know, actual goofy. But I think it works with the Pomp and Circumstance music. And there are two visual gags that stick out to me. The first one is when you have all the animals lining up to get on the ark, and then to the side you see a unicorn, a dragon, and what looks like a hippogriff, just laughing because they don't need to get on the ark. The world's not going to end due to the wrath of God. Yeah, think again. So that was a cute visual gag. The other visual gag is when Donald Duck is directing traffic for all the animals to get on the ark. He sees a pair of ducks walking by. I'm even laughing just talking about it. He sees a pair of ducks walking by. He just does a double take where he looks down at one of the ducks and then looks at the camera. That moment always makes me laugh because it's just so... It's so stupid, I can't help but love it. But I imagine that might not sit well with fans of the original Fantasia, which, if that were the case, then the Firebird Suite is probably the segment for you. This is the finale to Fantasia 2000, and in my opinion, it's just as epic, just as dark, just as haunting, and just as beautiful as Night on Bald Mountain and Ave Maria was in the original Fantasia. Again, the art style for this segment is completely different from the previous segments, but it's probably the closest to looking like an actual Disney animated feature. And the Firebird itself is just such a visual spectacle, right up there with Czerniak from Fantasia. So overall, it's just fantastic. Even though it has stylistic differences between the original, I think that's what helps make this movie unique and stand on its own. So why didn't this movie do all that well? Well, first of all, the release of this film was just a flat-out mess. The movie premiered in December of 1999, but wasn't released until January of 2000. And by release, it was released very limitedly, like exclusive to IMAX, and there just weren't enough IMAX screens at the time, and it kind of had this weird on-tour release back in the day. I remember here in Los Angeles, I saw Fantasia 2000 twice in a little pop-up IMAX screen that Disney had built to show the movie. It was not that far away from LAX, and it was only built for Fantasia 2000. It doesn't exist anymore. And then it didn't get a full theatrical release until June. So it had a very scarce release in the beginning of the year 2000 and didn't get a wider release until 6 months later. And because of that, the movie flopped. It debuted at number 11 when it got a wider release, and Michael Eisner called it Roy E. Disney's folly. Because of course Michael Eisner is a genius and has never made any terrible decisions when it came to being CEO of Disney. That was total sarcasm if you couldn't tell, by the way, although in Michael Eisner's defense, I think he's getting a run for his money when it comes to worst Disney CEO. And there was actually another sequel in the works called Fantasia 2006 that got canned because, you know, this movie didn't do so well. So history has basically repeated itself. The first Fantasia didn't do so hot, so they scrapped the idea of making any more. Fantasia 2000 doesn't do so hot, so again, they scrapped the idea of doing more. But it's kind of a shame because I always thought that they could have made a really great third movie called Fantasia 3D. Ever since Avatar came out and pretty much changed the game for 3D films, nowadays 3D movies are not as prominent and nobody really cares about 3D in movies anymore. But back when Avatar just changed the game, I always felt like Disney should have taken advantage of that and make another Fantasia movie and use the 3D to your advantage. Not to where things are flying at you towards the screen, but make the 3D part of the environment. Like, make us feel more immersed into the movie the same way Avatar immersed audiences. But even if they didn't make any other movies, I just never understood why Disney didn't bother to make it a concert series. Like, make Fantasia an actual concert series. I don't understand why Disney doesn't just make their own Fantasia shows. I mean, we have the Hollywood Bowl. Take that opportunity to make animated segments played to pieces of classical music, and they can be animated segments exclusively for the Hollywood Bowl, and have it run like every, I don't know, 2-3 years. I think that would just, I think people would go see it. I mean, because the Hollywood Bowl is always packed whenever I go, and because Disney fans love to cling on to nostalgia, I feel like doing an actual concert series for Fantasia, like once every 3 years, would be a big hit. I remember they actually did Fantasia at the Hollywood Bowl one time, but I don't understand why they didn't do it more often. Whatever, that's just me in my wishful thinking route. Back to Fantasia 2000. If I were to give this a rating, I'd say worth seeing in your lifetime. Again, I think there are points of this movie that are better than the original Fantasia and make it more unique, but at the same time, the first Fantasia was truly something special. And like I said in my original review, you're not going to see anything like this ever again. And with Fantasia 2000, as much as I love the movie overall, the animated segments do feel a little more modern and not as experimental as they were with the original Fantasia. So, still a great movie regardless, and a great start to the post-Renaissance, even if financially didn't do so hot. And there you go, that's my review for Fantasia 2000. Now next up, we're going to be talking about the next film of the post-Renaissance, Dinosaur. Wait, what? Yeah, I imagine that's the biggest response people give when you tell them that this movie is part of the official Disney canon. But we'll get to that next week. I've officially caught up with my Disney reviews in the plan that I have to review them every Wednesday of the year. So next week we're going to continue with Dinosaur. But now I want to know what you guys think about Fantasia 2000. If you've seen it, what did you think? Whatever the case may be, let me know in the comments below. And until next time, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there's only one. Hello everyone, I just wanted to say thank you all for watching my review for Fantasia 2000. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell button to get notifications. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, go check out my Twitch channel, and support me on Patreon. I'll see you guys in the next video, but until then, have a good day and take care of yourselves.